Hello and welcome to another episode on our series of India's wars since its independence. And in this episode, we'll tell you about how India reacted to Pakistani intrusions along the Kargil heights once it became known that Pakistan had pushed in troops in fairly large numbers right across those icy heights, either around Kargil or even as far away as the Mushko Valley. The total stretch apparently that Pakistani troops and irregulars had occupied was about 100-kilometer stretch, going up to 150 kilometers, and they were reinforced with regular army troops. They were supplied by helicopters and they were ready to battle Indian troops. Initially, a blame game started in India, both in the corridors of South Block as well as in the press, as to who should be held responsible for that. Most people were critical that the Indian Army chief was out of India on travels and therefore was oblivious about what was happening. The job of the Indian Army is to respond to intelligence that is provided by India's external intelligence agencies from across the LOC or the LAC or even the international border. So therefore, the external intelligence agencies, logically put, should have alerted the country about Pakistan's build-up, as we have brought out in the earlier episode, that was happening from as early as November 1998, almost 6 months after the nuclear tests that India and Pakistan had done, which led to concern all over the world that both were nuclear powers now, and if they went in for a conflict, it could see the possible use of nuclear weapons. That didn't happen, but how the Indian response unfolded is interesting to see. First, the Indian military was briefed by various inputs that came in that Pakistani build-up had taken place. Mr. Vajpayee, then India's Prime Minister, decided to engage with military commanders directly, doing away with the bureaucratic buffer that normally exists in civil-military relations. The bureaucracy, as records show, was pretty clueless about how the military should be equipped. In fact, the General of the Indian Army, General Ved Malik, apparently went on record to say that we don't have much, sir, but we'll fight with what we have. There was a shortage of weapons, there was a shortage of ammunition, and all had to be put together in haste because the media was blaring away that Indian territory had been occupied by Pakistan and its forces and India must evict them. But the military, led by General Malik, have personally confided to me to say the following. One, they needed time to prepare for the conflict. They could not just rush in troops without acclimatization. These were very icy, fierce heights, some of them as high as the Siachen Glacier and the surrounding Soltoro Ridge. Secondly, the military did not have enough troops in those areas because some of the Indian Army's divisions were located in the plains that had to be moved up, so they needed acclimatization. Thirdly, the artillery that was going to be a game changer needed to be sufficiently deployed to be able to target all those heights that Pakistani troops and their regulars had occupied. But the general narrative that had come to prevail in India as Pakistan was pushing that line, and the world press was also picking it up initially, that Pakistani Mujahideen had taken control of those heights as part of their longer desire to liberate Jammu and Kashmir from India. But people who were fighting there eventually realized it was not Mujahideen. It was regular Pakistan Army troops, because Mujahideen don't occupy icy heights in their battle to take over a location as part of an insurgency. Secondly, what the Indian troops began to realize that Pakistan was fully prepared for the long haul, equipped, armed, and even stocked to stick it out for the long run. But when the Indian government, led by Mr. Vajpayee, spelt out India's desire that all these intruders needed to be pushed away from the LOC to territories that India had held since actually 1947-48, but more specifically after the Suchetgarh Agreement of 1972 that defined the LOC that runs from Jammu via Poonch onto Kargil, Ladakh and NJ 9842, and beyond that is the Siachen Glacier. Those territories must be cleared of Pakistani intrusions. Interestingly, another historical nugget that people don't often talk about, there were initial major differences of opinion between the Army Chief General Ved Malik and the Air Chief Air Marshal Tipnis. The Army wanted the use of air power to be able to soften those targets by bombardment. The Air Chief was a bit reluctant simply because it is hard for fighter aircrafts to fly in those heights at the speed at which fighter aircrafts fly, to target only militant held positions like bunkers and sangars all along the LOC, because you can't really see them at the speed with which you fly along the mountain ranges. And which mountain range in those multiple ranges that are there in those Himalayan heights is the range that is your LOC. But eventually these differences were resolved and the Air Force played a sterling role in supporting the Indian troops on the ground. But credit must go eventually to the frontline infantry soldier who fought with courage, tenacity and resilience, and despite lots of blood on the snows of the Kargil, Indian troops went post by post and evicted the Pakistani intruders physically, and many acts of exceptional gallantry were there for us to see what Indian troops were all about. The stories of Captain Hanif, of Bikram Batra, of Captain Manoj Pandey and Sanjay Singh and Yoginder Yadav are clearly etched in our memory. But India began to occupy those heights steadily. And as the balloons started going up higher and higher, Nawaz Sharif panicked. He ran to Washington DC to get President Clinton to intervene to resolve the problem as a face-saving solution, and America asking both sides to cease fire. Clinton refused, A, because Nawaz Sharif landed up in Washington on 4th of July, which is America's Independence Day. He was uninvited. Clinton was not in White House. He was actually in Blair House nearby. And there was no formal meal that could be organized for Mr. Nawaz Sharif and his gang, so they ordered pizzas there. But what Mr. Clinton said to him, that America recognizes the line of control as the formal boundary between India and Pakistan. America recognizes that Kashmir belongs to India and Pakistan must announce its withdrawal. They wanted a joint statement. Clinton refused. So Nawaz Sharif had to announce by 12th of July that they would be withdrawing. This caused a huge rift between Nawaz Sharif and General Parvez Musharraf, who was the army chief and was chosen by Nawaz Sharif for the job, earlier superseding others. But now it was Musharraf's reputation versus Nawaz Sharif's reputation. So what really happened was, by then Indian troops were pushing out the Pakistani intruders, and in all, India evicted about 130 posts held by the Pakistanis, who were stretched in an area of about 100 to 150 kilometers in a depth of 5 to 6 kilometers. But Pakistan was hugely embarrassed. A, because their lies had come to haunt them again. B, because India had found evidence of Pakistan Army and not Mujahideen in the ID cards of soldiers that were captured or were found dead. Worse still, Pakistan refused to acknowledge their dead soldiers and got India to eventually bury those deads in those icy heights of Kargil. But India gave the enemy an honorable burial, because a soldier is a soldier. He does his job as is ordered. The other aspect More important than just the meeting between Nawaz Sharif and President Clinton was the spillover effect of that meeting. President Clinton not only asked Pakistan to announce a withdrawal without giving it his formal support on behalf of the United States, because his argument was, you started the war, you end it. Secondly, when Nawaz announced a full withdrawal on 12th of July, the rift between Nawaz Sharif and the military widened. Third was America's decision to tilt towards India thereafter as a more reliable partner in South Asia than Pakistan, which resorted to brinkmanship to achieve its long-stated Kashmir agenda. And fourth, most importantly, was the fact that Pakistan was embarrassed by the international community unanimously supporting the Indian position on the conflict and the Indian position on Jammu Kashmir. So the entire set of events actually hit Musharraf and his team on their face. What also happened was Prime Minister Vajpayee, unfortunately, in my view, sanctified Musharraf's position as a self-styled president of Pakistan by inviting him to India and giving him head of state treatment in the hope that peace and engagement between the two countries would continue in the lines that Vajpayee had envisaged with Nawaz Sharif following his visit to Lahore. There were hundreds of brave Indian lives that were lost. The Indian Army performed with unimaginable but highly impressive courage and determination. And those who lost their near and dear ones were shocked to see Musharraf strutting around the grounds of Rashtrapati Bhavan and in other places in India where he was given a VIP treatment. Musharraf, true to form, pulled out of a joint statement that was to come after their meeting in Agra, saying there was a hidden hand that was stalling the peace between the two countries. Was that a hidden hand in the Pakistani establishment, or was that a hidden hand in Vajpayee ji and his rivals? That is a subject of another debate, but essentially India and Pakistan after Kargil conveyed a message to all those alarmists who believed that nuclear weapon states should not go into conflict, because Kargil proved that there is a strategic space between a nuclear conflict and an insurgency which allows for a limited conflict if it takes place without escalating into a full-fledged nuclear war.